We're continuing with our reading of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam to the Amala Purana, recommended by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we're in the third canto, chapter 2 already, or up to text number 20. This chapter is entitled Remembrance of Lord Krishna. Shall we? Yes. Certainly others who were fighters on the battlefield of Kurukshetra were purified by the onslaught of Arjuna's arrows. And while seeing the lotus-like face of Krishna, so pleasing to the eyes, they achieved the abode of the Lord. Purport: the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, appears in this world for two missionary purposes: to deliver the faithful and to annihilate the miscreants. But because the Lord is absolute, his two different kinds of actions, although apparently different, are ultimately one and the same. His annihilation of a person like Shishupal is as auspicious as his actions for the protection of the faithful. All the warriors who fought against Arjuna, but who were able to see the lotus-like face of the Lord on the battlefront, achieved the abode of the Lord exactly as the devotees of the Lord do. The words pleasing to the eyes of the seer are very significant. When the warriors from the other side of the battlefield saw Lord Krishna at the front, they appreciated his beauty, and their dormant instinct of love of God was awakened. Shishupal saw the Lord also, but he saw him as his enemy, and his love was not awakened. Therefore Shishupal achieved oneness with the Lord by merging into the impersonal glare of his body, called the Brahmajyoti. Others who were in the marginal position, being neither friends nor enemies, but slightly in love of Godhead, by appreciating the beauty of his face, were at once promoted to the spiritual planets, the Vaikuntha's. The Lord's personal abode is called Govardhana, and the abodes where his plenary expansions reside are called the Vaikuntha's, where the Lord is present as Narayan. Love of Godhead is dormant in every living entity, and the entire process of devotional service unto the Lord is meant for awakening this dormant eternal love of Godhead. But there are degrees of such transcendental awakening. Those whose love of God is awakened to the fullest extent go back to the Goloka Vrindavan planet in the spiritual sky. Whereas persons who have just awakened to love of Godhead by accident or association transfer to the Vaikuntha planets. Essentially, there is no material difference between Goloka and Vaikuntha. But in the Vaikunthas, the Lord is served in unlimited opulence, whereas in Goloka, the Lord is served in natural affection. This love of God is awakened by the association of pure devotees of the Lord. Here the word partashtra, puta, is significant. Those who saw the beautiful face of the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra were purified first by Arjuna when he made his onslaught with arrows. The Lord appeared for the mission of diminishing the burden of the world, and Arjuna was assisting the Lord by fighting on his behalf. Arjuna personally declined to fight, and the whole instruction of the Bhagavad-gītā was given to Arjuna to engage him in the fight. As a pure devotee of the Lord, Arjuna agreed to fight in preference to his own decision, and thus Arjuna fought to assist the Lord in his mission of diminishing the burden of the world. All the activities of a pure devotee are executed on behalf of the Lord, because a pure devotee of the Lord has nothing to do for his personal interest. Arjuna's killing was as good as killing by the Lord himself. As soon as Arjuna shot an arrow at an enemy, that enemy became purified of all material contaminations and became eligible to be transferred to the spiritual sky. Those warriors who appreciated the lotus feet of the Lord and saw his face at the front had their dormant love of Godhead awakened, and thus they were transferred at once to Vaikuntha Loka, not to the impersonal state of Brahmajyoti, as was Shishupal. Shishupal died without appreciating the Lord, while others died with appreciation of the Lord. Both were transferred to the spiritual sky, but those who awakened to love of God were transferred to the planets of the transcendental sky. Uddhava seemingly lamented that his own position was less than that of the warriors on the battlefield of Kṛṣṇa, because they had attained to Vaikuntha, whereas he remained to lament the disappearance of the Lord. Lord Sri Krishna is the Lord of all kinds of threes, and is independently supreme by achievement of all kinds of fortune. He is worshipped by the eternal maintainers of the creation, who offer him the paraphernalia of worship by touching their millions of helmets to his feet. Purport: Lord Sri Krishna is so mild and merciful, as described in the above verses, and yet he is the Lord of all kinds of threes. He is the Supreme Lord of the three worlds, the three qualities of material nature, and the three Puruṣas: Karnadakshayi, Garbhadakshayi, and Shiradakshayi Vishnu. There are innumerable universes, and in each and every universe there are different manifestations of Brahma, Vishnu, and Rudra. Besides that, there is the Sheshamurti, who bears all the universes on his hoods, and Lord Krishna is the Lord of all of them. As the incarnation of Manu, he is the original source of all Manus in innumerable universes. Each universe has manifestations of 504,000 Manus. He is the Lord of the three principal potencies, namely Chit Shakti, Maya Shakti, and Tatastha Shakti. And he is the complete master of 6 kinds of fortune: wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. There is none who can excel him in any matter of enjoyment, and certainly there is no one greater than him. No one is equal to or greater than him. It is the duty of everyone, whoever and wherever one may be, to surrender completely unto him. It is not wonderful, therefore, that all the transcendental controllers surrender to him and make all offerings of worship. 22. Therefore, O Vidura, does it not pain us, his servitors, when we remember that he, Lord Krishna, used to stand before King Ugrasena, who is sitting on the royal throne, and used to submit explanations before him, saying, O my Lord, please let it be known to you. Lord Krishna's gentle behavior before his so-called superiors, such as his father, grandfather, and elder brother, his amiable behavior with his so-called wives, friends, and contemporaries, his behavior as a child before his mother Yashoda, and his naughty dealings with his young girlfriends, cannot bewilder a pure devotee like Uddhava. Others who are not devotees are bewildered by such behavior of the Lord, who acted just like a human being. This bewilderment is explained by the Lord himself in Bhagavad-gītā 9:11 as follows: Avajananti mahamudha mahashintam mahashutam padam bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Persons with a poor fund of knowledge belittle the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, not knowing his exalted position as the Lord of everything. In Bhagavad-gītā, the Lord has explained his position clearly, but the demoniac atheistic student squeezes out an interpretation to suit his own purpose and misleads unfortunate followers into the same mentality. Such unfortunate persons merely pick up some slogans from the great book of knowledge, but are unable to estimate the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pure devotees like Uddhava, however, are never misled by such atheistic opportunists. Aho Bhakiyam Sanakalakutam Jinam Saryaparena Apyasatri Lebe Kaminta Trishikam Tatonyam Kamvadayalum Sharanam Rajema Kamvadayalum Sharanam Rajema. Alas, how shall I take shelter of one more merciful than he who granted the position of mother to a she-demon, Putana. Although she was unfaithful, and she prepared deadly poison to be sucked from her breast. Here is an example of the extreme mercy of the Lord, even to his enemy. It is said that a noble man accepts the good qualities of a person of doubtful character, just as one accepts nectar from a stalk of poison. In his babyhood, he was administered deadly poison by Putana, a she-demon, who tried to kill the wonderful baby. And because she was a demon, it was impossible for her to know that the Supreme Lord, even though playing the part of a baby, was no one less than the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. His value as the Supreme Lord did not diminish upon his becoming a baby to please his devotee Yashoda. The Lord may assume the form of a baby or a shape other than that of a human being, but it doesn't make the slightest difference. He is always the same Supreme. A living creature, however powerful he may become by dint of severe penances, can never become equal to the Supreme Lord. Lord Krishna accepted the motherhood of Putana because she pretended to be an affectionate mother, allowing Krishna to suck her breast. The Lord accepts the least qualification of the living entity and awards him the highest reward. That is the standard of his character. Therefore, who but the Lord can be the ultimate shelter? Poignant. 24. I consider the demons who are inimical toward the Lord to be more than the devotees, because while fighting with the Lord, absorbed in thoughts of enmity, they were able to see the Lord carried on the shoulder of Garuda, the son of Tarksha, Kashyapa, and carrying the wheeled weapon in his hand. Purport. The asuras who fought against the Lord face to face got salvation due to their being killed by the Lord. This salvation of the demons is not due to their being devotees of the Lord. It is because of the Lord's causeless mercy. Anyone who is slightly in touch with the Lord somehow or other is greatly benefited, even to the point of salvation, due to the excellence of the Lord. He is so kind that he awards salvation even to his enemies, because they come into contact with him and are indirectly absorbed in him by their inimical thoughts. Actually, the demons can never be equal to the pure devotees, but Uddhava was thinking in that way because of his feelings of separation. He was thinking that at the last stage of his life he may not be able to see the Lord face to face, as did the demons. The fact is that the devotees who are always engaged in devotional service of the Lord in transcendental love are rewarded many hundreds of thousands of times more than the demons by being elevated to the spiritual planets, where they remain with the Lord in eternal, blissful existence. The demons and impersonalists are awarded the facility of merging in the Brahmajyoti effulgence of the Lord, whereas the devotees are admitted into the spiritual planets. For comparison, one can imagine the difference between floating in space and residing in one of the planets in the sky. The pleasure of the living entities on the planets is greater than that of those who have no body and who merge into the molecules of the sun's rays. The impersonalists, therefore, are no more favored than the enemies of the Lord. Rather, they are both on the same level of spiritual salvation. Text 25. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, being prayed to by Brahma to bring welfare to the earth, was begotten by Vāsudeva in the womb of his wife Devaki, in the prison of the king of Bhoja. Purport. Although there is no difference between the Lord's pastimes of appearance and devotees of the Lord do not generally discuss the subject matter of his disappearance. Vidura inquired indirectly from Uddhava about the incident of the Lord's disappearance by asking him to relate Krishna Katha, or topics on the history of Lord Krishna. Thus Uddhava began the topics from the very beginning of his appearance as the son of Vāsudeva and Devaki in the prison of Kamsa, the king of the Bhojas at Mathura. The Lord has no business in this world, but when he is so requested by devotees like Brahma, he descends on the earth for the welfare of the entire universe. This is stated in the Bhagavad-gītā 4.8. Parichanaya sadhunam vinashaya shaduskritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. 26. Thereafter his father, being afraid of Kamsa, brought him to the cow pastures of Maharaj Nanda, and there he lived for 11 years like a covered flame with his elder brother Baladeva. Purport. There was no necessity of the Lord's being dispatched to the house of Nanda Maharaj out of fear of Kamsa's determination to kill him as soon as he appeared. It is the business of the Asuras to try to kill the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or to prove by all means that there is no God, or that Krishna is an ordinary human being and not God. Lord Krishna is not affected by such determination of men of Kamsa's class, but in order to play the role of a child, he agreed to be carried by his father to the cow pastures of Nanda Maharaj, because Vāsudeva was afraid of Kamsa. Nanda Maharaj was due to receive him as his child, and Yashoda Mai was also to enjoy the childhood pastimes of the Lord, and therefore to fulfill everyone's desire. He was carried from Mathura to Vrindavan just after his appearance in the prison of Kamsa, prison house of Kamsa. He lived there for 11 years and completed all his fascinating pastimes of childhood, boyhood, and adolescence with his elder brother, Lord Baladeva, his first expansion. Vasudeva's thought of protecting Krishna from the wrath of Kamsa is part of a transcendental relationship. The Lord enjoys more when someone takes him as a subordinate son who needs the protection of a father than he does when someone accepts him as the Supreme Lord. He is the father of everyone, and he protects everyone. But when his devotee takes it for granted that the Lord is to be protected by the devotee's care, it is a transcendental joy for the Lord. Thus, when Vāsudeva, out of fear of Kamsa, carried him to Vrindavan, the Lord enjoyed it. Otherwise, he had no fear of Kamsa or anyone else. And now we'll take a few reflections or questions.
And she wanted to pretend to be a mother. And Krishna accepted that, sucking milk from her breast. I mean, the reward, that is the amazing thing, is that Krishna was not thinking about the poison, but he was looking at the attempt of her to give some milk, even though that milk was mixed with poison. Sometimes in our service also, we approach Krishna and some hidden agenda, some personal interests, like I want a wife, I want a nice house, I want to be healthy, I want to have something. But Krishna don't look at that. Krishna wants to see the intention, the feeling. There is a small scent of service, Krishna never forgets. And that's why it's so, how Srila Prabhupada put it so beautiful in the purport, when it says that even the slightest intention of service, Krishna is the shelter. He never forget us. No? So that's a reflection about that.
Thank you very much. There's a verse I was thinking of when. Go ahead.
I also wanted to mention the verse 3:22 is one of the verses that attracted the mind of Shukadeva to the Swami when he was coming out of the womb. It was one of the verses recited to bring him back.
Yes.
You had something?
Huh?
You were going to say you were the words.
Oh yeah, it's just that whole concept of approaching Krishna with some material request is mentioned in Bhagavatam and also in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Satyam Dishiti Artito. Satyam Dishiti Artito Artito Nirnam Naiva Artito Yat Puna Artito Yata Swayam Vidate Swayam Vidate Vajatam Ichatam Yachapitanam Nija Palapalava. That is that. Krishna says, sometimes people approach me with a request for fulfilling material desire. It says, I'll fulfill the desire, but I'll do it in such a way it doesn't want it anymore. And instead I'll replace that desire with the desire of taking shelter of his lotus feet. So he does some tricky thing. David Vrata Prabhu.
I was just trying to understand a sentence. Maybe there could be a little bit more of an explanation. Those whose love of God is awakened to the full extent go back to the Govardhana planet in the spiritual sky, whereas persons who have just awakened the love of God by accident or association are transferred to like planets. What I'm trying to understand is that, does that mean there is no, then maybe like an ambiguous sankalpa with the practitioners who attain Vaikuntha, or there's a clear desire for those who attain? I'm just trying to understand what the...
They accidentally walked into a Sunday feast. Had a plate of Kṛṣṇa. I think it's just mentioning that the soul is in such a liminal position in the material world, and as someone quoted earlier, Nityasita Krishna Prema Sadhikamana, that there's already a tendency to love Krishna. If they come into contact with Krishna, for instance, the idea of accidental is somewhat mentioned in the Rupa Goswami, Namashtika number 2. In Namadea, what? No, that's number 2. What is it? Say, what's the beginning? Jayanamadea Munibrindage he Janarunjanaya Paramakshara Krite Tomarada Rada Pimada Gudiritam Ikilogratapa Putalimba Limbasi. It's practically an accident because people are, as this verse says, that they deride the Lord. It's like somebody, just because of the urge of anger or something like that, they say, get out of here, Hare Krishna. It's that pastime in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where Gadadhar Das, not Gadadhar Pandit, but one of the associates of Balaram, in the cowherd boy category, he went to see the Nawab and he burst into his palace. And he said, I want to see the Nawab now. And he started making a ruckus. Okay, you can't see him. But the Nawab came out and he told him, I want you to chant Hare Krishna. And he said, I don't have the time to chant Hare Krishna now. And Gadadhar Das started dancing. That's all right. You already did it. You already said Hare Krishna. I'm just saying that there's lots of ways in which Shastra says people, by musical entertainment, by an act of derision, and so forth, they all get this namavasa, and it's a pathway that can take them to the next level.
The verse you were quoting, Satyam Dishiti, is 5:19:27.
5:19:27, 5:19:27, 5:19:27. Satyam Dishiti. Yes.
So, Guru Maharaj, like in India, like most of the people say Krishna and Rama and we can go to the temple. So, how does it work?
It's Puri Bhumi. So pious here. Start a little kirtan somewhere, people just come running over and start jumping up and down. It's really funny. Well, if a spark lands on dry grass, then it'll start a conflagration. If it lands on something that's moist, it may not for some time. So it really depends on the individual case of how effective it is. That's mentioned in a whole bunch of shlokas. Toga yam yajiva grinar artate namatu vyam tepusta pasteja vilusasa arya pramantra nama grananti ete, like Devahuti, coming right up. And Prabhupada mentions, he said, of course, the effectiveness of somebody once saying Hare Krishna depends on their attitude.
Is their bhakti started, like their progress continuously?
Well, Bhagavatam says, if you derisively say, if you incidentally say when Krishna motorcycle shop, all those are incidents of namabhasa. And there's benefit from, great benefit from namabhasa, from saying Hare Krishna. So I'm saying it's punya bhumi. You hear the holy names a lot. In India, there's so many places of pilgrimage. And the main thing that obstructs people's ability to get benefit from the holy name is Maivad. If somebody's Maivad, then there's a way that obscures the power of the holy name. That's why it's so dangerous. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, don't associate with Mayavads, because then you don't get much. But if you're a very sinful person, but you're not, like Jagayan Madai were sinful, but they weren't offensive towards Vaishnavas. And there's a way that they weren't Mayavad. So they instantly got benefited from the association with the devotees. Anyone from the outside people's party? You used to have a representative out there. You should hold another election.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
I was meditating on this verses from the previous section when Maitreya was saying these different leelas pain me. And I was wondering how we should relate to this and understand what Maitreya means as hearing these certain things that perplex him, and how we can relate that to our own personal spiritual lives and development, and hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, these leelas.
Okay, if you rephrase it, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I know the part, we just read it, but what? Did you just say the question one more time?
What does Maitreya mean by it pains him? Is it the perplexion that he's perplexed about it, and that's why it's paining him, or is it the emotion of the?
No, it's not perplexed. But this is also in Kunti Devi. She says vidambanam, that this is bewildering. She knows what's going on, and so does Uddhava. If it's all in Viraha Bhav, the separation from the Lord. And this pain is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita by Kaviraj Goswami. He said, if you take the bite of the most poisonous serpent, it certainly is very painful. And then at the same time, you pour nectar on the head of that person. So pouring nectar on their head means the greatest kind of pleasure they could be getting. And he said, this is an analogy of what it feels like to be in separation from the Lord. the severe pain of the bite of a poisonous serpent while nectar is being poured on your head. It's something that is fairly unique to our sampradaya coming from Madhavendra Puri, and the idea of Viraha Bhava being the highest level of happiness. Although it appears like great suffering, and as Govinda Maharaj used to say, they're crying, 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 crying. But actually it's the greatest happiness. And that's what Prabhupada mentioned in one of the purports. This is all due to Viraha Bhava. His calculation that the demons are getting more than he is. And those types of seeming distortions of the fact that are because of that feeling of separation. Okay? Hare Krishna, thank you. Anyone else out there? How's it going out there? Okay. We have a few more verses. Everyone ready?
Yes.
Yes. We're on 27, right? Yes. In his childhood, the Almighty Lord was surrounded by cowherd boys and calves, and thus he traveled on the shore of the Jamuna River, through gardens densely covered with trees and filled with vibrations of chirping birds. Nanda Maharaj was a landholder for King Kamsa, but because by caste he was a Vaishya, a member of the mercantile and agricultural community, he maintained thousands of cows. It is the duty of the Vaishyas to give protection to the cows, just as the Kshatriyas are to give protection to the human beings. Because the Lord was a child, he was put in charge of the calves with his cowherd boyfriends. These cowherd boys were great rishis and yogis in their previous births, and after many such pious births, they gained the association of the Lord and could play with him on equal terms. Such cowherd boys never cared to know who Krishna was, but they played with him as a most intimate and lovable friend. They were so fond of the Lord that at night they would only think of the next morning when they would be able to meet the Lord and go together to the forests for cowherding. The forests on the shore of the Jamuna were all beautiful gardens full of trees of mango, jackfruit, apples, guava, oranges, grapes, berries, palm fruit, and so many other plants and fragrant flowers. And because the forest was on the bank of the Jamuna, naturally there were ducks, cranes, and peacocks on the branches of the trees. All these trees and birds and beasts were pious, living entities born in the transcendental abode of Vrindavan, just to give pleasure to the Lord and his eternal associates, the cowherd boys. While playing like a small child with his associates, the Lord killed many demons, including Aghasura, Bakasura, Balabasura, and Gardabasura. Although he appeared at Vrindavan just as a boy, he was actually like the covered flames of fire. As a small particle of fire can kindle a great fire with fuel, so the Lord killed all these great demons, beginning from his babyhood in the house of Nanda Maharaj, the land of Vrindavan. The Lord's childhood playground still remains today, and anyone who visits these places enjoys the same transcendental bliss, although the Lord is not physically visible to our imperfect eyes. Lord Chaitanya recommended this land of the Lord as identical with the Lord and therefore worshipable by the devotees. This instruction is taken up especially by the followers of Lord Chaitanya, known as the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And because the land is identical with the Lord, devotees like Uddhava and Vidura visited these places 5,000 years ago in order to have direct contact with the Lord, visible or not visible. Thousands of devotees of the Lord are still wandering in these sacred places of Vrindavan, and all of them are preparing themselves to go back home, back to Godhead.
Jai.
Text 28. When the Lord displayed his activities just suitable for childhood, he was visible only to the residents of Vrindavan. Sometimes he would cry and sometimes laugh, just like a child, and while doing so, he would appear like a lion cub. If anybody wants to enjoy the childhood pastimes of the Lord, then he has to follow in the footsteps of the residents of Vraja like Nanda, Upananda, and other parental inhabitants. A child may insist on having something and cry like anything to get it, disturbing the whole neighborhood, and then, immediately after achieving the desired thing, he laughs. Such crying and laughing is enjoyable to the parents and elderly members of the family. So the Lord would simultaneously cry and laugh. In this way, he merges devotee parents in the humor of transcendental pleasure. These incidents are enjoyable only by the residents of Vraja like Nanda Maharaj, and not by the impersonalist worshippers of Brahman or Paramatma. Sometimes when attacked in the forest of demons, Krishna would appear struck with wonder, that he looked on them like the cub of a lion and killed them. His childhood companions would also be struck with wonder, and when they came back home, they would narrate the story to their parents, and everyone would appreciate the qualities of their Krishna. Child Krishna did not belong only to his parents, Nanda and Yashoda. He was the son of all the elderly inhabitants of Vrindavan and the friend of all contemporary boys and girls. Everyone loved Krishna. He was the life and soul of everyone, including the animals, the cows, and the calves. 29. While herding the very beautiful bulls, the Lord, who was the reservoir of all opulence and fortune, used to blow his flute, and thus he enlivened his faithful followers, the cowherd boys. Purport. As he grew to 6 and 7 years old, the Lord was given charge of looking after the cows and bulls in the grazing grounds. He was the son of a well-to-do landholder who owned hundreds and thousands of cows, and according to Vedic economics, one is considered to be a rich man by the strength of his store of grains and cows. With only these two things, cows and grain, humanity can solve its eating problem. Human society needs only sufficient grain and sufficient cows to solve its economic problems. All other things, but these two, are artificial necessities created by man to kill his valuable life at the human level and waste his time in things which are not needed. But Krishna, as the teacher of human society, personally showed by his acts that the mercantile community or the Vaishyas should herd cows and bulls and thus give protection to the valuable animals. According to Smriti regulation, the cow is the mother and the bull is the father of the human being. The cow is the mother because, just as one sucks the breast of one's mother, human society takes cow's milk. Similarly, the bull is the father of human society because the father earns for the children, just as the bull tills the ground to produce food grains. Human society will kill its spirit of life by killing the father and the mother. It is mentioned herein that the beautiful cows and bulls were of various checkered colors, red, black, green, yellow, ash, etc. Because of their colors and healthy, smiling features, the atmosphere was enlivening. Over and above all, the Lord used to play his celebrated flute. The sound vibrated by his flute would give his friends such transcendental pleasure that they would forget all the talks about Brahmananda, which is so praised by the impersonalists. These cowherd boys, as will be explained by Śrīmad Goswami, were living entities who had accumulated heaps of pious acts and thus were enjoying with the Lord in person and were hearing his transcendental flute. The Brahma Samhita 530 confirms the Lord's blowing his transcendental flute. Velum kvalantam aravindalayatasham Vārhavatam samasitam buddhasundaranga Kandarvakoti kamaniya vishesha shobham Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Ramaji said, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who plays on his transcendental flute. His eyes are like lotus flowers. He is decorated with peacock plumes, and his bodily color resembles a fresh black cloud, although his bodily features are more beautiful than millions of cupids. These are the special features of the Lord. Text 30. Prayuktam Bhojarajena Mayina Kama Rupina Lilaya Vyanudaptamstan Vala Kridanakaliva. Prayuktam, engaged. Bhojarajena, by King Kamsa. Mayina, great wizards. Kama Rupina, who could assume any form they liked. Lilaya, in the course of the pastimes. Vyanudat, killed. Tan, them. Tan, as they came there. Vala, the child. Kridanakam, dolls, Eva, like that. The great wizards who were able to assume any form were engaged by the king of Bhoja, Kamsa, to kill Kṛṣṇa. But in the course of his pastimes, the Lord killed them as easily as a child breaks dolls. The atheist Kamsa wanted to kill Kṛṣṇa just after his birth. He failed to do so, but later on he got information that Kṛṣṇa was living in Govardhana at the house of Nanda Maharaj. He therefore engaged many wizards who could perform wonderful acts and assume any form they liked. All of them appeared before the child Lord in various forms, like Aga, Bhaka, Putana, Shakata, Trinavarta, Tenukasura, and Gardava. And they tried to kill the Lord at every opportunity. But one after another, all of them were killed by the Lord as if he were only playing with dolls. Children played with toy lions, elephants, boars, and many similar dolls, which are broken by the children in the course of their playing with them. Before the Almighty Lord, any powerful living being is just like a toy lion in the hands of a playing child. No one can excel God in any capacity, and therefore no one can be equal to or greater than him. Nor can anyone attain the stage of equality with God by any kind of endeavor. Jnana, Yoga, and Bhakti, by three recognized processes of spiritual realization. The perfection of such processes can lead one to the desired goal of life in spiritual value. But that does not mean that one can attain a perfection equal to the Lord's by such endeavors. The Lord is the Lord at every stage. When he was playing just like a child on the lap of his mother, Yashoda Mayi, or just like a cowherd boy with his transcendental friends, he continued to remain God, without the slightest diminution of his six opulences. Thus he is always unrivaled. 31. The inhabitants of Vrindavan were perplexed by great difficulties because a certain portion of the Jamuna was poisoned by the chief of the reptiles, Kalya. The Lord chastised the snake king within the water and drove him away. And after coming out of the river, he caused the cows to drink the water and proved that the water was again in its natural state. The Supreme Lord Kṛṣṇa desired to utilize the opulent financial strength of Maharashananda for the worship of cows. And also he wanted to give a lesson to Indra, the king of heaven. Thus he advised his father to perform worship of Go, or the pasturing land and the cows, with the help of learned Brahmanas. Since he is the teacher of everyone, the Lord also taught his father, Nanda Maharaj. Nanda Maharaj was a well-to-do landholder and owner of many cows, and, as was the custom, he used to perform yearly worship of Indra, the king of heaven, with great opulence. This worship of demigods by the general populace is also advised in the Vedic literature, just so people can accept the superior power of the Lord. The demigods are servants of the Lord deputed to look after the management of various activities of universal affairs. Therefore it is advised in the Vedic scriptures that one should perform yajnas to appease the demigods. But one who is devoted to the Supreme Lord has no need to appease the demigods. Worship of the demigods by common people is an arrangement for acknowledging the supremacy of the Supreme Lord, but it is not necessary. Such appeasement is generally recommended for material gains only. As we have already discussed in the second canto of this literature, one who admits the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not need to worship the secondary demigods. Sometimes being worshipped and adored by less intelligent living beings, the demigods become puffed up with power and forget the supremacy of the Lord. This happened when Lord Krishna was present in the universe, and thus the Lord wanted to give a lesson to the King of Heaven, Indra. He therefore asked Maharajnanda to stop the sacrifice offered to Indra and to use the money properly by performing a ceremony worshipping the cows in the pasturing ground on the hill of Govardhana. By this act, Lord Krishna taught human society, as he has instructed in the Bhagavad-gītā also, that one should worship the Supreme Lord by all acts and by their results. That will bring about the desired success. The Vaishyas are specifically advised to give protection to the cows in the pasturing ground or agricultural land instead of squandering their hard-earned money. That will satisfy the Lord. The perfection of one's occupational duty, whether in the sphere of duty to oneself, one's community, or one's nation, is by the degree to which the Lord is satisfied. Verse? Yeditamam prapadyante? Yatha pumbir dvijasheshta varnashrama vipagasha svanustistasya dharmasya samsadir haritoshanam bhaktyatu tosha bhagavanga jayutapaya. Yes, go ahead. You have an inquiring look on your face. Any more comments from the outside People's Party? We need the New Zealand devotees here. Remember? Are they coming?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. You were saying in the purport, it was saying that the worship of the demigods is just to come to a higher platform of worship of the Supreme Lord. So I was just wondering, like, Vedically speaking, where does it talk about, like, this Supreme Lord as Krishna, and how can I better understand Krishna in his, like, two-armed supreme position, as opposed to all these variegated expansions?
Well, Prabhupada gives a logical progression of understanding that in the Bhagavatam 2:35. And he takes us through a progression of realizing, first of all, that you're not your body, then realizing that there's a higher intelligence that's coming to you, just like a parent gives intelligence to a child. And then he takes you to understanding that that's the Superspirit, the Paramatma. And then he says that, you could just give me the verse. I want to probably say it in his own words. 2:35. Ensign Anamapakai. Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu. Here. As this conclusively proves that the ordinary living being has no independent power of perception or of motion, and as we undoubtedly feel our existence being conditioned by nature's energy, we conclude that he who sees is spirit, and that the senses as well as the objects of perception are material. The spiritual quality of the seer is manifest in our dissatisfaction with the limited state of materially conditioned existence. That is the difference between spirit and matter. There are some less intelligent arguments that matter develops the power of seeing and moving as a certain organic development, but such an argument cannot be accepted because there is no experimental evidence that matter has anywhere produced a living entity. Trust no future, however pleasant. Idle talks regarding future development of matter into spirit are actually foolish, because no matter has developed the power of seeing or moving in any part of the world. Therefore, it is definite that matter and spirit are two different identities, and this conclusion is arrived at by the use of intelligence. Now we come to the point that the things which are seen by a little use of intelligence and the living being cannot see or move or eat or do anything without the use of intelligence. When one fails to take advantage of intelligence, he becomes a deranged man, and so a living being is dependent on intelligence or the direction of a superior being. Such intelligence is all-pervading. Every living being has this intelligence, and this intelligence, being the direction of some higher authority, is just like a father giving direction to his son. The higher authority who is present and residing within every individual living being is the Superself. At this point of our investigation, we may consider the following question. On the one hand, we realize that all our perceptions and activities are conditioned by arrangements of material nature. Yet we also ordinarily feel and say, I am perceiving or I am doing. Therefore, we can say that our material senses of perception and action are moving because we are identifying the self with the material body, and that the superior principle of Superself is guiding and supplying us according to our desire. By taking advantage of the guidance of Superself in the form of intelligence, we can either continue to study and to put into practice our conclusion that I am not this body, or we can choose to remain in the false material identification, fancying ourselves to be the possessors and doers. Our freedom consists in orienting our desire to either toward the ignorant material misconception or the true spiritual conception. We can easily attain to the true spiritual conception by recognizing the Superself, Paramatma, to be our friend and guide, and by dovetailing our intelligence with the superior intelligence of Paramatma. The Superself and the individual self are both spirit, and therefore the Superself and the individual self are both qualitatively one and distinct from matter. But the Superself and the individual self cannot be on an equal level because the Superself gives direction or supplies intelligence, and the individual self follows that direction, and thus actions are performed properly. The individual is completely in the direction of the self, the direction of the Superself, and in the matter of seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, willing, etc. So far as common sense is concerned, we come to the conclusion that there are three identities, namely matter, spirit, and superspirit. Now, if we go to the Bhagavad-gītā or the Vedic intelligence, we can further understand that all three identities, namely matter, individual spirit, and the superspirit, are all dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Superself is a partial representation or plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavad-gītā affirms that the Supreme Personality of Godhead dominates all over the material world by his partial representation only. God is great, and he cannot be simply an order supplier of the individual selves. Therefore, the Superself cannot be a full representation of the Supreme Self, Puruṣottama, the Absolute Personality of Godhead. Realization of the Superself by the individual self is the beginning of self-realization, and by the progress of such self-realization one is able to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by intelligence, by the help of authorized scriptures, and principally by the grace of the Lord. The Bhagavad-gītā is the preliminary conception of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, and Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the further explanation of the science of Godhead. So if we stick to our determination and pray for the mercy of the director of intelligence sitting within the same bodily tree, like a bird sitting with another bird, as explained in the Upaniṣads, certainly the purport of the revealed information in the Vedas becomes clear to our vision. And there's no difficulty in realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vāsudeva. The intelligent man, therefore, after many births of such use of intelligence, surrenders himself at the lotus feet of Vāsudeva, as confirmed by the Bhagavad-gītā. We ran out of time. It's a really good question you asked, and we can continue it tomorrow. And guess what? I'm going to read one more verse. Where did I end? Are we on 30? O sober Vidura, King Indra has been insulted, poured water incessantly on Vrindavan, and thus the inhabitants of Vraja, the land of cows, were greatly distressed. By the compassionate Lord Krishna saved them from danger with his pastime umbrella, the Govardhana hill. In the third season of the year, the Lord enjoyed as the central beauty of the assembly of women by attracting them with his pleasing songs in an autumn night brightened by moonshine. Before leaving the land of cows, Vrindavan, the Lord pleased his young girlfriends, the transcendental gopis, in his Rasalila pastimes. Here Uddhava stopped his description of the Lord's activities. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, second chapter of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, entitled Remembrance of Lord Krishna. Bravo! Sadhu, sadhu. Bravissimo. Thank you everyone today for joining the first session of the reading of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. We made good progress today. In case you wanted to know, we're ahead of schedule. So we may have to read the fifth canto also. Just kidding. So tomorrow we'll start up at chapter 3 out of 33. And it is entitled The Lord's Pastimes Out of Vrindavan. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Radha Govinda, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, 18 Thakur Goriyaki Kariyachina Atmasat, 18 Nera Charan Vandam Tine Moranat. If you so desire, please instill a sense of deep love for all the forms of the Lord and give us the realization of the sweetest form of all, the beautiful form of Krishna in Vrindavan. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part, please unmute and say Hare Krishna.